So the reboot of Are You Afraid of the Dark has dropped its first episode on YouTube. The show doesn't actually come out till tomorrow. Now, I had made a list of all of the films and TV that were relating to horror that were coming out in October of 2019, and somehow this was amended from the list, not purposely, just forgot it. I'm not sure how I forgot it. But I just did. I was looking forward to this. There was supposed to be a movie that accompanied this as well in theaters, but I guess that got scrapped and they went with just this little 3-episode revival. Now, if this will actually get renewed for a second season or if this is just supposed to be a one-off, I do not know. I can tell you, though, that I did watch it and I am a fan. But that being said, it is pretty different than the original series. Now, the original series is not something I'm just remembering off of nostalgia. I'm also remembering it as a person who just watched almost every episode pretty recently. I did review seasons 1 through 5 right here on the channel, each individual episode by itself. So they're pretty current in my mind, so I do understand and remember the structure of the original show. Obviously, I mean, it's hard to not bring up Are You Afraid of the Dark with some kind of nostalgia talk, you know, just kind of real quick. Big fan of it as a kid, you know, as most people were my age, if they were into horror, and some even if they weren't into horror later on, but they were into it then, you know, it was just, I was at the right age range, you know, and it came out. And I always looked forward to it every night on Saturday, or not every night, on every Saturday night Snick, when they had all that, and Adventures of Pete and Pete, and the Adventures of Alex Mack, all that. And, oh man, what else am I missing here? Late night shows like that. Was it Clarissa? I can't remember. It doesn't matter, but man, I always look forward to this. This was at like 9:30. It was that 30-minute spot right before. It was late night Saturday, and I just always looked forward to it. And so when they announced that they were bringing this back, it was like, okay, all right. And they said, you know, a miniseries and a film, and it was like, sweet, but we just get this, and the production value is high. Now, where the changes are coming in is the changes come from the structure of the show. Now, this is going to be a straight through narrative as to where the other show was just kind of episodic in the sense that like one episode would be self-contained and then the next episode really wouldn't play too much into anything that had happened in the previous episodes, just mostly because the wraparounds were just bookended. They were very little parts of the show. So you'd have the Midnight Society come out, they'd have their little banter back and forth for maybe a minute, then they'd sit down, they'd do their spiel, submit it for the approval, boom, into the show. The story would go on for the lion's share, 95% of the episode, and you're talking a 20-something minute show, so like 20 of those 22 minutes was the actual story itself, and then like a minute at the end as well to kind of wrap things up. And so where this show differs is that this is a 45-minute format for the episode itself, and over 25 minutes of that was actually the wraparound, and the story in the middle was actually a much smaller part. Another thing here is they're building characters within this. So we've got a character named Rachel Carpenter. Yeah, we got some horror fans that are doing this. And she's moved to a new town. And when she gets into her school, she meets a couple kids, but she doesn't really get to know them all that well. But one of the kids, played by the actor who plays Ben Hanscom in the It franchise, It Chapter 1 and 2. He was also in the Goosebumps movie. He sees that she's doing a drawing, and she sees that he's wearing a shirt that says watch horror movies. So he's definitely the me of the group. And she's like, oh, have you ever seen The Changeling? And he's like really impressed by this. Like some, young girl would even know what the hell The Changeling was. I'd say these kids are somewhere 13, 14 years old. And so she then, she's doing a drawing, she's covering it up, and she tosses it in the trash. He sees the drawing, he sees that she's obviously got horror potential, and he wants to see if she can be inducted into the Midnight Society. And from there, it's just kind of the series of getting her introduced to this idea, and the way they go about it I thought was pretty cool. I thought it was I really liked the exploration of the Midnight Society and actually seeing the goings-ons of these kids' lives, how a new member actually gets there, all of that, because we don't really get almost any of that in the original series. It was just very, very short-lived. I remember when certain kids would come, they'd bring them in, and for like 2 seconds, it'd be like, all right, so this is how it's going down. You tell the story, and then there we go. And then that was just it. It was so quick. So I do prefer this for sure. As far as the wraparound goes, I do like the more exploration of the characters. I would have liked to have seen more of the original Midnight Society as characters. They just weren't on screen anywhere near enough for me. But with that short amount of time, they did need to stick to the story as much as possible. So I do understand why they did it. I just personally would have preferred to get to know the kids better. And in this, you do get to see it. But where I do like the other show more is that they're focusing a lot more on the story as well. So this show, the story that this girl tells is very short. I mean, 10 minutes of this show, and it really isn't all that impactful. It isn't really much of a focus at all, because what they're going for here is an overarching, story. It's going to connect all 3 episodes, and the story is actually going to play into reality, and it's going to start interacting with their real lives. So the stories aren't going to be disconnected from the narrative at all. They're going to be incorporated with it, and this whole story that she's telling is going to play into the next episodes. So I thought that was pretty damn interesting, because it's a completely different take. I know that they did this. Now, my memory of this is a little shoddy because I haven't watched the 7th season in a long time, but I remember they did something like that in the 7th season where Gary and company were actually the main characters, and their story was being told through them and whatnot. And so it felt kind of like what my memory of that season was like, or at least the first few episodes. Can't really exactly remember, but this is more of a long stretched arc of a season, but it's only 3 episodes, obviously. But as the show goes, we're focusing mainly on the characters, and then the story, which is very small, is going to start playing into their life. So they're actually the real story. So the wraparound is going to become the actual narrative and the actual story itself, which I like. I think it's cool. It's just different for sure, and that's fine. Reinvent it, reboot it. You don't have to do the same damn things. Don't stick to the constraints of appeasing what came before. I think that's a big mistake that remakes make, no matter how much people bitch about things. I like that way of thinking. Like, I'm going to do this. I'll stick to kind of the heart of it. I'm a fan, whatnot. But I also want to reinvent it, try something new. And that's what we got going on here. Production value's high. I thought some of the comedy was solid. I watched this with my 6-year-old daughter, and she was totally fine. So this is absolutely, totally for family. You could watch this with your kids for sure. I didn't find anything to be very scary at all. This Mr. Top Hat character is really silly. But, I mean, if you really go back to most Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes now as an adult, they're all pretty silly. Now, I'd have to actually ask my daughter if she found that guy to be scary. But I didn't find him to be even scary as a child in my head. I was trying to kind of put myself in that way, but just wasn't working in that way. I actually did take notes here for a spoiler review, but I'm not going to do it. I think that I'll talk more about it. Maybe I'll do like a full thing at the end. So I think once all 3 episodes are over, maybe I'll talk about it all spoilery at that point. But for now, I dug it. I absolutely think that you should check it out. Of course, if you're not enjoying the first like 15, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, shut it off. It's on YouTube as it stands right now. Tomorrow it'll be on Nickelodeon. I will be curious to hear people's thoughts on this, nostalgia fans. See if they're digging it. I mean, it's it's far and above production value where the other show was. The other show was like really shitty quality, like production value. This show has like a full, almost theatrical film look to it. It's crazy. It's really well produced. So it's good. Good acting. You know, the jokes are pretty decent. The story I didn't find all that interesting yet, but I want to see how it all plays out because it isn't just one specific story. It's going to bleed into the next episodes and so on. So we'll see. All right. What did you guys think? Let me know. Adios.